Hello, everyone. Welcome to Future Nonprofit, a podcast and YouTube channel where we sit down with industry leaders to talk about the nonprofits our world needs today and tomorrow. On this episode, we have the unstoppable Mimi Stiles, who is the visionary CEO and founder of Measure. Measure is a research and data-driven organization committed to using both lived experiences and really robust quantitative analysis to advance human dignity and equity. Please check out all of our guests, all of whom, like Mimi, are incredible, wherever you get your podcasts or right here on YouTube. And join me as we unpack the stories of some of today's most innovative leaders. All right, so I'd like to start with some icebreaker questions just to kind of warm up the conversation. And the first one, it's my personal favorite. You wrote a book, you're going to be speaking more and more. If you could have one piece of music that accompanies you in any room you walk into, what would that piece of music be? If you could only have one, what piece of music would you choose?
So there's this hip hop song that I love so very much. In actuality, I connected with the artist. His name is Ahmad. When I told him that I was writing my book, and my book actually starts with one of the lyrics in that song, and it's called Back in the Day. It's so cool. It's like, back in the day when I was young, I'm not a kid anymore. And some days I sit and wish I was a kid again. And so for me, it's everything that I am in terms of reminiscing about the 90s. It's about thinking about, just the joy of childhood and the opportunity of growing up together with other people that just love the culture. So that's definitely my walk-up song.
I love that. I don't think I've ever had somebody with a more clear and personally related answer. Usually it's I dig this tune. That's so cool. Okay. Last question, or last icebreaker question. If you had to describe what you do professionally, like your career, your job, to a group of 5-year-olds, what would you say?
I would say that I am an activist. And I know for 5-year-olds that still might be a little different. And luckily I have a 4-year-old. So I tell her, if you ask her, what does mom do? She'll say that mom is a scientist activist, right?
Nice.
Because they understand scientists, but obviously Clara understands activists because she goes to everything with me. But that's how I would let folks know what I do is I'm a scientist activist.
I love that. Go. Yeah. Well, let's start with your story of origin. When you were your daughter's age, what did you want to be? What were your aspirations as early as you can remember growing up?
I always wanted to be an archaeologist. I've been fascinated with the past since I was a child. I've always wanted to go dig up something, and that's been there for years and years and years. But yeah, I've always wanted to be an archaeologist.
Do you feel like anything you're doing today taps into that? Is there any connective tissue between that Raiders of the Lost Ark archaeologist and scientist activist?
Absolutely. I think even today I am a person that is digging up the roots of historical traumas, of things that have been buried for so many generations. I'm literally digging that data up and retelling the story that more accurately depicts the experiences of those that are impacted mostly by what I'm uncovering. And so, yeah, I feel like it does. I never thought about this, to be honest with you, but it absolutely does make a lot of sense. There's so much connection there with being able to revisit the past and construct new meaning for our future. And that's exactly what I do. Mm-hmm.
When you think about your past, if we do a little digging, a little archaeology expedition into your past, is there a childhood memory that you have that either most relates to the work you do today? In fact, sometimes I talk to people who are founders of nonprofits, and they have this memory just burned into their mind that is in many ways been the seed that's grown into what they're doing today. Or it's simply been a memory that just has shaped you, or that is most kind of with you or sticks with you to this day. What is that childhood memory? Where do you go back to?
I honestly have two. I was, as a child, I was always very thoughtful, a little different as a kid. And I grew up in a home where my father was an activist, my grandfather was an activist. My mom was a businesswoman. And for me, I was always fascinated by data. And so the way that I interpreted, though, as a child was that I used to lay back in my bed and look at the popcorn ceilings in our home. I mean,
I have this.
built, and I used to look at the popcorn ceilings and I used to count the dots in the ceilings, in the ceiling. And then I would also draw constellations within those dots. So I would connect those dots. I would draw constellations. I would be fascinated about the number of dots. I would create maps and routes and different things of that nature as a child. And so I think that's what really got me my fascination with data. And I also, as a child, used to dream very vividly and my dreams were always something around negotiation, which was really interesting. So I would negotiate, I would be in different wars, and I would be in different conversations with officials. This is as a child. I told you I was a very magical child, but I would always be negotiating from one side to the other. And for me, it was kind of a nightmare as a child. I used to wake up, needing my mom, to help and to explain my dreams. But I do that now. That's exactly who I am as a community organizer, as a leader, as a interrogator of so many different systems now. Negotiation has always been something that has been within me.
When you think about the people in your life, I mean, it sounds like you had some pretty dynamic parents, but were there other people that, and it might be your parents, but who is that person that you think has made the most significant imprint? Sometimes it's a coach, a mentor, a leader, obviously parents, but outside of your parents, who's that person who has most kind of imprinted or coached or poured into you?
Well, that person is Mrs. Ray Clendenning. She was my middle school principal, and she was the principal of Martin Luther King Middle School in Oceanside, California. She tapped me when we first opened that school to kind of be a leader within the school, which was really interesting. I was, placed in meetings with adults with her. I was, a peer advisor. She trusted me to speak up on behalf of my other students that were there. I mean, not students, but classmates. And so she put something in me as a really young child. She showed me what it meant to believe in myself. Her belief in me showed me what it meant to believe in myself. She was a Black woman, and I didn't see very many Black women in Oceanside in positions that she had. I always had my mom. My mom was, I guess I can't even say this without not recognizing my mom, because she was an author. She was on the news. She was one of the top, Black women in the stock market and commodities trading. So I got a lot from her. But Miss Ray Clendenning definitely was a person that I look at even today as a mentor.
Talk a little bit about the family situation, the dynamic. You said you had an activist dad and a commodity trading businesswoman mom. I have to imagine some of the conversations in the home must have been interesting.
Oh, my. I mean, when I tell you, Ted, my home was wild. So my book is called The House the 90s Built. Okay. And so I really get deep into this story, but I had a really interesting home. With my father, back in the 1970s, he was a Black Panther. And his brother was a Black Panther in California. Their father, my Papa T, between the 1960s and the 1970s, he worked as a commissioner for the city. He drove around in a cop car. So I think about what their home looked like. Their, conversations over grits and scrapple. Like that's like, and so my dad then raised me as a person that always knew that my voice mattered. He always told me to speak up. He always told me to be, to be the change that I want to see. I recall back when I was in third grade was when I led my first movement. So I was in, Pacifica Elementary School, and the way that I conceptualized race and so forth was just color, black and white. And I was going through the lunch line and I said, why is there only white milk? There needs to be chocolate milk. Like that was my, young mind. So I went home and told my dad, and he says, well, go start a movement, go start a petition. And I did. And so, 40 years later, there's now chocolate milk at Pacifica Elementary School because I led a petition for it because my dad.
So it's almost like you were shaped into an activist without even wanting it. You didn't even choose it. It chose you by nature of your home and your environment. It's just how you learn to live life and show up in life.
That's right. Yeah, definitely.
And yet, when we think about your career, right, like we'll talk about this in a moment, but I find that some people's pathway is very linear and intentional. Like I wanted to be a lawyer. I decided to go to this school. Then I was going to go to this law school. Then I did that. And then blah, 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 blah. Other people's story or career path is a little bit more, for lack of a better word, figuring it out as I go. Which one are you? Are you more, have you had a linear, proactive, this is what I'm going to do and I go do it? Or has it been more opportunity grabs you, or it's more responding to things more than it is proactively driving things?
Yeah, I would probably say the latter. So I'm always a person that makes the best of the situation that I'm in. And so that has also bled over into my career choices. So my career is very colorful, right? Like I knew that I loved public speaking. That was number one. And so I started my work really in the news, right? I was a newscaster. I was an anchor, a TV news anchor for quite some time in smaller markets in Santa Maria, California, and then also in Alaska, in Fairbanks, Alaska. So I was the news lady for quite some time. After that, I got deeper into wanting to better understand our government and also protect my husband, who was back and forth and at war, right? So I then went ahead and was worked for the Army. I was a part of a group of folks called the Agile Workforce. It was basically really interesting people that the Army didn't know really what to do with, but they knew that if they gave us an opportunity, then we could, create something interesting. So that's where I really started my data work. I was a part of what's called the Network Integrated Evaluation, testing out systems of systems and really supporting the generals that were leading the integration of data systems for the protection of the future warfighter. So that was sort of my introduction into knowing and understanding how data talks to one another. Again, I've always done all of these different things, though, but at the same time creating my own forms of activism, right? So I was the Black Student Union vice president all throughout high school. I, created, convening spaces for Black women like all the time, and so it was very natural for me to leave corporate America and to take everything that I've learned from being a news anchor, from working for the Army, from, working for Lockheed Martin, and put that into what drives me. And that is equity. That is anti-racism. That is community power. That is, uplifting communities that have been marginalized for so long, and doing it in a way that we have a strategy to really measure change.
You have referenced a lot the goal to alleviate anti-racism and all of the issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging that are an element of your work today, and it sounds like we're a part of your home growing up. Have you been adjacent to the discrimination and to the racism that you're combating? Have you experienced it firsthand? Have you seen it in relationships? Like, what's your relationship to the issues that you're seeking today to mitigate?
Yeah. As a Black woman growing up in this amazing country, I have seen so much joy in my 43 years of life. But I have also experienced so much microaggression, so much marginalization. I've experienced not being seen, almost invisible, daily. I've experienced the manifestation of a lack of privilege, a lack of access. Being able to name it and to know what it feels like gives me a superpower, though, right? It gives me a superpower to be able to navigate it and to, in some ways, flip it on its head. So I know, and I'm already prepared when I go down to the Capitol to go speak up for something, for a particular bill or something that is impacting my community. I already know that more than likely I'm not going to be seen. So I need to make sure that I'm heard. And every word that comes out of my mouth comes from the experiences that I've had to navigate all these years. And so I've done a great job, I want to say, at being heard. Even if you can't see me, you gonna hear me, And
it seems like data plays a big role in legitimizing, amplifying the voice, taking it out of just anecdotal experience and making a legitimate case for something that numbers have a powerful way of doing. When did you tap into that and get the then inspiration to set up Measure? Talk about the origin story of Measure and how that came about.
Yeah, and just to your point, data speaks a language that everyone understands. It's a common language. So when I talk about being heard, if I can speak in data, then people get it. It's hard to argue with it, although data is also biased, right? It is hard to argue with the black and white numbers that we see. Where Measure came from was I was working with an organization locally during the height of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I was leading marches, holding systems accountable. But what I realized is that there was no real mechanism for measuring what we meant when we said build trust. There wasn't, there was surveys that the police department would send out to communities, but who was creating the surveys? What was the methodology of the creation of these surveys? Who was involved? What were the metrics that were assessing change? What were the metrics that were assessing relationships, which then also drives the funding, right? And so I was on a panel discussion with the mayor of Austin, the chief of police, city council members, and I just said, where's the damn data? I just said it that way. Where's the damn data? It was very simple. And no one can answer me. And instead, there was a lot of echoes on that same panel. The mayor, who's where's the data? What are the metrics? That's a good point. Like Mimi said, we need more data. And this was at a time where then President Barack Obama was just launching. As a matter of fact, on the same day, he was launching what's called the Police Data Initiative, right? So he was launching this initiative nationally, and I'm having this conversation about the damn data locally, and it produced an opportunity for me to think about, how do I bring my community together with the police department to think about creating metrics that matter to the people. And so that's where Measure got its start. We then also began to realize that we needed to do more. And it wasn't just policing, right? There were several systems of oppression, several systems of injustice that also needed to be evaluated. And so Measure stood in that gap. And that's where we're at right now. So we focus in on health injustices, educational injustices, economic injustices, criminal justice, and now more recently, technological injustices. And so that's the work that we do now.
Unpack that phrase, technological injustice. You had me right up until that phrase, and I went, I don't even know that I understand what that looks like. What's an example of that?
Yeah, it's really about access to technology and access to the building of technology, the innovation of technology. The problem is that there's so much tech right now in our faces, especially with the AI, the generative AI boom. Right? There's a lot of systems that are being created. When you talk about generative AI in particular, you're talking about data that has been existing on, in the cloud for several years over. And it becomes a problem of justice when we see the outputs of generative AI that do not take account, people, in many cases, people of color just haven't been the ones designing these systems. And so when I talk about technological injustice, I talk about, again, access. I talk about consent. I talk about, we we were just talking today about this idea of human in the loop, right? We need to make sure that there's a human in the loop when it comes to AI. Otherwise, AI has no guardrails. I believe it is humans in the loop that matter, and those humans have to be most connected to the particular problem that needs to be solved, right, when it comes to generative AI. And so we are creating a space at Measure where we have launched our own platform for humans to be connected and to collectively interrogate artificial intelligence so that it best serves us.
I'm curious. I've asked this question to a few different guests who are in the space that you're in, not necessarily data, but activism for a more diverse and equitable society. And on the continuum, on one side is awareness. And the theory on awareness would be if we just help raise awareness, the problems fix themselves. On the other side would be activism. No matter how much awareness we do, we're going to have to fight. Because people may still choose to not, the awareness isn't sufficient. In fact, if you go to the extreme other side of the continuum, there's going to be a fight no matter how aware people are. So we have to be prepared to fight legally or whatever the fight looks like, if you will, right? Where do you feel like Measure is on that continuum? Like every nonprofit kind of floats between that. Our goal is to simply raise awareness. Our goal is to be activistic and, you can't live in the middle. Where do you feel like Measure tips? Are you guys more about data-informed awareness or data-enforced activism?
Yeah, Measure is a unique organization. It's definitely in the middle. So we look at ourselves as like research to local action, right? But we also recognize that we cannot do it alone. So us creating data is really about us creating information for our community to self-advocate so that they have the data that they need in order to go speak up at city council or in order to go stand on the Capitol steps. So we're definitely in the middle. We actually look at ourselves as data activists, as all the folks that are within the organization. We have over 38, data activists that are from our community that have been trained on our tools and that are using our tools for change. So we're absolutely in the middle, Ted.
Let's talk about the measurement of impact. So a lot of nonprofits are really good at measuring their, what I would consider inputs, their resources. They're really good at measuring their outputs, which would be programmatic outputs. But they have a really hard time measuring their impact in the world because sometimes it's squishy or it's hard to measure. And maybe there's assumptions made that if our programs are working, then impact is taking place. What does that look like for Measure? How do y'all measure your impact? And I really want to talk about the CIMs, right? The community impact metrics, because my guess is that factors into the answer.
Yeah, definitely. So at Measure, we have 3 different solutions. Let me just start there. We have equitable evaluation, and that's us being able to train our community on using our tools that we've developed for evaluation. It's about us partnering with our community, with nonprofit organizations and grassroots organizations within our community to help them to measure impact using what we call the CARE model. The CARE model is a 12-week evaluation process where we deploy a measure evaluator, which is someone within our community that has been trained to use our tools with an organization. And so the CARE model starts with, really understanding the problem. It then goes into really breaking down the assets that are already within the community. Instead of a community needs assessment, we do a community asset map because we want to remain, strength-based instead of always focusing in on the deficit. We then go into solutioning with our community and then measuring those solutions using our theory of change framework, right? So we're looking at, what are those solutions and what would the world. This is a good, and I'm just grateful that you said that because I use what's called the PUMP methodology by Stacey Barr, first of all, when it comes to measurement. And so she's always taught, what would the world feel like, sound like, smell like, taste like if what you are doing, if what your solution is actually progressing change. So that's sort of the foundation of community impact metrics. It's about behavior change. It's about actual world change? What would things look like and feel like? For Measure, one of our programs under our training and advocacy solution is to protect Black girls, right? And so one of our metrics in the way that we assess ourselves is the percentage of workshop attendees who feel more equipped and ready to protect Black girls. And so we're grateful for 100% so far. We've trained thousands right now on the protection of Black girls. And so, that's one metric that it's not necessarily a fluffy one, but it's one that we believe we are changing the world and being able to measure that. So I do see that world. I see that world every day, that utopia and what that utopia looks like for me is really a world without fear. It's really about a world without fear, a world that is encouraged by empathy, a world where even in her rest, the Black girl is honored and respected. It is a world where we exist to love, and where that love produces the energy that we need to survive. And so I see that world all the time. And I know that what we do today matters to that world.
How has what Measure does been received since its birth, since its inception? Have you found more headwinds, perhaps, or friction than you thought you might? Has it been better received than you thought it might be? And have you been invited in? And obviously, there's, like any administration change, we're in a new administration and there are new headwinds and maybe new opportunities. But like, where are you today when it comes to the friction points and the opportunities that you see ahead?
Yeah, when I built Measure in the very beginning, I wanted it to be as inclusive, as palatable. Although some folks can, digestible.
Yeah. So no flavor, no spice.
Look, I that was the beginning, right? And so today I'm like, some folks can kindly choke. All right. Like we are doing the work at Measure today that has been informed by so many Black women before us. I look at the work of like Ida B. Wells, like this is nothing new, right? Like she took tabs on the atrocities in America and she calculated them and she reported it out. We're doing the same thing at Measure, right? We are sharing the data that may not always, be what, the city wants to hear or the institution wants to hear or the police department wants to hear, right? But we're giving our community power through the data. Today, it's hard. It's very hard. There is a concerted effort to minimize, to minimize empathy at the end of the day, right? And just community power and, and justice. And there is, now terminology is becoming weaponized against us, right? The sheer audacity of flipping, discrimination onto the people that are most impacted by it has just been, to me, disgusting. And so Measure is more important today than ever before, since I did create this organization in a way that is able to ebb and flow and able to deliver the insights, data insights that are, again, not bound by color or race or gender or anything like that. They're the numbers. And because we have that as our tool of activism, we're able to withstand the headwinds.
Well, what does growth look like for Measure if you are thinking out 3 to 4 years? Where do you want Measure to be? And what does growth look like? Is it greater income, more staffing? Are you launching different services that generate revenue? Like what's the future? What do you see in 3 years?
I see Measure Ignite really booming in the next 3 years. Measure Ignite is our social media, our responsible social media and measurement platform. If you think of like if LinkedIn and Tableau had a baby, it would be Measure Ignite.
Love that.
We've created it from the code, so we own the code to the front end. It's a place where I don't have to fear to post, where I don't have to, be afraid of who's using my data or selling my data and all of the things. But it's a place where we can all be sustained. It's about organizations like mine that say, oh, we have the data, and an organization that has maybe the funding, right? Where we can meet and convene and build together, where we can become force multipliers for change. It's a place of mutual aid. And then it's also a place where we can measure our impact and, download a quick dashboard so that we increase transparency and accountability, right? There's always this question of like, what is this nonprofit doing? Or what is this foundation doing? And so Measure Ignite is a place where we can have those questions answered quickly. So Measure to me is really going towards the eradication of technological injustice. We have to build our own, and we've built our own. And so I think that Measure, like its growth phase, is really going to be more so concentrated onto Measure Ignite and its growth.
That's awesome. I could see a future where you're becoming an engine for so many other nonprofits across the country by your services and approach. And I mean, yeah, that's incredible. We're in. I want to get personal for a moment. So you're a founder. You're a leader. You've been at the senior seat of this organization that you started. When you think back, what's one of the best leadership decisions that you've made? Maybe it was you took a risk, somebody you hired, whatever it might be. What do you think when you think about your all the decisions that you've had to make since the beginning of an organization? And what's one of the decisions that you're most proud of?
It was actually the decision to rest. That was the biggest leadership decision that I've ever made. That was the most impactful, I think, for my organization and so many other people who may look up to the work that I do. It was a decision to rest. It was a couple of years ago. I decided to go on a sabbatical, and I made it very public. And I made it and I said it as more so as a kind of a revolution to being more so revolutionary. I've been a student of a Black woman who has done so much work around the power of rest. Her name is Trisha Hershey, and her work really gave me the permission that I needed to say no, right? And for me, taking that time off allowed me to, of course, restore myself, but then it also gave real tangible trust into the people in my organization. So while I was gone, they worked and they built and they created together. And so I came back to an organization that was even stronger than when I originally left, right?
And the fear probably was that if I rest or I stop or I whatever, things will fall apart.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's just in general, like women, especially, like I feel like, we're mamas and we're just the heart in many cases. And so a lot of times we do think that like if we just let go, then, things will fall apart. But there's this little story, right, that my pastor used to talk about all the time. It was about this like monkey and he would put his hand in this like coconut, right? It was a little this is the way they trapped him too. Like they would have a coconut and they would make the hole just big enough for the monkey to stick his hand in, and he would grab all the fruit and the goodies that were inside this coconut. But he would be trapped there because he wouldn't unleash his hand. It would be a fist, so he couldn't pull his hand out of the coconut, right? So he would just hold on and hold on and hold on. All he needed to do was release the stuff so that he can get away and, be safe. For me, that's how I felt before. I felt like I had to just hold on and hold on and hold on. And it was not okay. It was not okay for me, health-wise. It was not okay for the organization. And so my leadership decision was to let go, right? And to just let go, let God, and sit back and watch what happens. And I'm grateful that I was able to do it.
Yes, it's a great lesson. That's going to make a huge contribution to the people listening. I have two more questions. I want to focus on innovation and then just your own thoughts on what you would say to a room full of leaders. But let's talk a little bit about innovation. So you're in a space, data, computer analysis, analytics, tracking. It seems like innovation and change are just par for the course. What does it look like for you as an organization in this space to stay agile and to be able to flex and grow and shift and not just get, not become fill in the blank company, whichever one you want to choose, Kodak, Microsoft, just kidding, Microsoft. But what does innovation look like for you in this space, and how do you maintain that as a part of your ethos, just as a part of your organization?
First of all, there's an organization out here in Austin. They're called Dawa Hills, and they say community is the best form of technology. So I love that because it reminds me about Measure as an organization needing to maintain relationship with people, intimate, human relationship, unity, right? When you have unity, you have so much power. And Measure, that has been our ethos. We convene the community, we bring community together, we give them a common language, which is data, and then it allows us to kind of ebb and flow with the changes that we're seeing, especially on today. But it's really about, for us, we also remain innovative at Measure. I am constantly evaluating the work that we're doing. And I'm constantly thinking about what's next and who needs to be involved. And so being able to be on our toes, and also making sure that we're bringing our community along has been, I think, what's given us great success.
If you were talking to a room of nonprofit leaders that were, of all sorts of different sizes and stripes and styles of nonprofits, but they're all senior leaders. What's the thing that you would want them to know? What's the biggest takeaway that you would want to download into them and have them leave understanding, learning, knowing, kind of that maybe prophetic, or that whatever that thing is that you want to challenge them with? What would that be?
I would ask them to reevaluate the problem that they are hoping to solve through their work. Completely reevaluate their problem. Start with that. I would say for them to take their problem statement and convene the community that's most impacted by the work that they're doing. Making sure that they have a town hall, they conduct a survey, that they do one-on-one conversations with the community that they are serving, and ask them, is this a problem? And reevaluate that problem and making sure that that problem is valid and interrogated. That's what I would say, because so often, the nonprofit engine, we create problems, and sometimes we create more problems for the communities that we're serving because we want to create a problem that we want to solve. That's not okay. And so what I would say is evaluate, evaluate, evaluate. If you don't know how to evaluate, reach out to Measure because we can show you how. But it's really about, making sure that the community that's most impacted by our work are actually the ones creating our solutions.
That's really good. Yeah, that's going to be a great nugget. Okay, so you're an author. Congratulations.
Yeah.
I've been one. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
What was the purpose of the book, and how does it fit into either the trajectory of Measure or your trajectory or both?
Yeah, it's a deeply personal book. It's a magical memoir. It's a story of healing, of restoration, and the 90s. It's all about growing up in the 90s, whether you were in elementary, college, or high school. It's all about the not having the language to name mental illness in the 90s. And because we didn't have the language, a lot of us didn't have the resources that we needed to navigate it. And so, many of us that are millennials or Gen Xers today are now really embracing what healing looks like because we did not necessarily have those structures or those supports back when we were kids. And so my book is called The House the 90s Built. It's a magical memoir where I journey and travel in time back to my home in the 1990s. And I re-acquaint myself and I re-experience my siblings. It's also a place where I'm able to go and reconcile with my father, with, appreciate my mother, right? And then also it allowed me a space to cope with some of the hardships that I'm experiencing today as a mother. It's going to be a trilogy, so it's a 3-part series. I just launched my pre-orders for the book. It'll be out in the world on April the 2nd. And pre-orders are already kind of flying off the shelf, which is also really encouraging. But it's really about it's a love letter, I want to say, that I've written to the kids of the 90s. Yeah.
Okay, I've got one final question, and then I want to respect our time. What is the best part of your job, of the work involved in your life day to day, and what's the part that's just the biggest grind or the least life-giving part of what you do?
The best part of my work is being able to see community members that may not have ever known what evaluation meant, what it meant to create a theory of change or to create a community asset map. And now they are Measure evaluators themselves. They're now upskilled. They are now making money. It's a brand new source of income for them. They're not only measuring at Measure, but now they may be working in the field and measurement and evaluation. I'm honored to say that Measure has increased the number of BIPOC evaluators in America. And that is what absolutely gives me life. What takes away right now is, the political landscape and the having to navigate, blatant racism once again. I feel like we've come so far only to take several steps back. And so that for me is absolutely a challenge that I know that all it's doing is it's creating another upswell for change and empathy to prevail.
So you can ride that wave, ride that tide as it presents itself over time.
Yeah.